And so I have no doubt that my destiny was to play drums and to be a woman drum, a quote unquote woman drummer, and to also be a little bit on that front end of that, on that threshold of opening the door for other people to come through. So that's definitely, I, that's definitely has been my destiny. My name is Carolyn Brandy. I've been drumming since 1968. I started during what was a cultural revolution that was happening in the United States. I was in Seattle, Washington. I was a big hippie. And I was down at the Pike Place Market one day, believe it or not, it happened there. And I saw these men playing Cuban music. They were playing rumba, and they had congas and bongo, and they were singing beautiful songs. And I got really attracted to it. And so after they were finished their songs, I asked the guy about it. And he said, "Oh yeah, we're teaching at the University of Washington if you want to come to a class." So I went to the class, and that's how I started. And I went and started studying with this guy. His name, he's passed now. Goodbye, rest in peace. Jerry Whedon was his name. And we just played everywhere because there were so many parties going on. And I didn't realize at first that it was kind of like a taboo for women to play. If I'd go to the park to play, because there was people playing everywhere. They would just get up and move to another place in the park. Or somebody would take my drum away from me, and hand it to me afterwards, like that. So, and then people would say things, like kind of mean things, like you're not supposed to do that, or I wouldn't let my daughter put that thing between her legs, was said to me many times, or stuff like that. Then I joined Laura Chora and Charisse Aretse started a group called Gwenyai, and it was the music of the Shona people from Africa. And Laura Chora had come and was associate of Dumi Mariari, who was the South African man that brought the South African, the Zimbabwean marimba to the United States. Very famous folklorist from Zimbabwe. He's passed away too. But anyway, I started playing drums for them. That was my first band. That was in about 72 or something like that. And then I came down to California, 1975, because I had met a man down here. I had come down with a friend, and she said, "Let's go study with Marcus Gordon, he's a really great drummer." I said, "Okay," and I took one lesson from him and went home, packed up everything I owned. My son, who was at the time, he was like, how old was he, 3 years old, and moved to California to study with Marcus. So I studied Afro-Cuban drumming with him for like maybe 5 years or something like that. He's the man who started the San Francisco Carnival. So at that time I met Rhiannon and the Women in Alive, and we started Alive in 1976, I guess. And that took off. We started touring the country for about 10 years. So when I came to California, I became introduced to Santeria, or how we call Regla de Ocha. And in that philosophy of life, there's the belief that you make a pact with Creator before you come to this dimension, and that we all have a destiny to fulfill while we're here. And so I really firmly believe that my destiny was to play drums as a woman and to break through some of those barriers around that. So in 1988, a friend of mine from Cuba told me that they were organizing some workshops in Tijuana, Cuba, with some of the maestros that worked at the Conjunto Folclórico Nacional de Cuba, the national dance troupe of Cuba. So I went there in 1988, and there was a maestro. His name was Mario Auregi, really incredible drummer, very famous drummer in Cuba, and he was there. And I asked him. I told him. I said, I've heard that the conjunto is teaching women the consecrated batadrum. And he looked at me and said, "No mujeres, no mujeres." So no women, no women. Because I wanted to ask him if I could come to the class. So that evening he was watching me playing some congas in a dance class. Somebody had gotten up and allowed me to sit down, and I was playing congas. And he kept looking at me, and then he came up to me afterwards and said, "Be at the class at 9:30." And so I was there waiting. The guys were all playing and everything. And finally Mario came, and he looked at the guy on the drum, and he went like this, and he looked at me and I went like that, and just everybody went, there was a kind of a hush fell over the room. And he drilled me for about an hour and a half with there were two other guys playing, because the bataille you play in a group of three. And at the end of it, he just drilled me. He gave me one rhythm after the next to see if I could pick it up. And then afterwards he said, "You have a beautiful feeling for the drum." He said, "You come to the class today." So I started going to the classes, and then I guess it was the next day or the day after, all heck broke loose, and everybody was mad and upset, and why, and how dare you, and why would you do that? And I mean, it was just terrible. And then he came up to me and said, "You know what, Carolyn," he said, "I can't teach you anymore here because it's so political." He said, "But if you come to Cuba to the workshop, I'll teach you whatever you want to know." We had a concert at the end of that workshop, and Mario, he was a very brave man. He wanted me, he said, "I got an award for being the best student in the class, blah, blah." But anyway, he told me at the concert he wanted me to play the Iya. There was another woman there who was an American Cuban by the name of Milena de Olga. She's a wonderful percussionist in LA. Anyway, she was also playing, and she played the atotele, the second drum, and then they had a man playing on the umquonqulo. So when we did that little recital for the end of our 2-week folkloric course, the TV was there, and they televised it on national TV. And there we were in all our glory, two women playing, these bata drums. I started Women Drummers International actually in 1998. I took my first tour of people to Cuba to study drumming and dance. I did 6 tours from 1998 through to about 2010, I guess. And we traveled the length of the island studying with really great drummers and dancers from the island of Cuba. And the first trip was in 1998. It was all women. There was about maybe 33, 34 of us. And we went to Havana to study. And I already knew that there were women drummers that were there, so I stipulated with the person who was organizing the trip on the Cuba side that I wanted to have women teachers. And they were like, "No, no, there's no women." And I said, "Oh, yes, there is." So they got Amelita and her Aleda Nani and a woman named Regla, I can't remember her last name, who were our teachers, as well as the son of a very famous drummer and folklorist, Michel Aldama. His father is Carlos Aldama, taught us. And Mario, my first teacher, was also our teacher at that workshop. So Women Drummers International actually started then in 1998. Flash forward to 2006. I started Women Drummers International. I started Born to Drum, the signature event for Women Drummers International. Born to Drum is a camp for women. It offers exposure to a lot of different kinds of drums from all over the world. The mission statement for Born to Drum is to empower women and girls in every aspect of their lives through the message of the drum. The reason I started the camp was because there was a camp that was happening here in California, in Northern California, that was a Cuban drum and dance camp, and they had Cuban instructors and they had American instructors. And I had asked one of my friends if he would give me a recommendation to teach there. And because a friend of mine had told me that like over 50% of the students were women. So I thought, oh, well, they would probably appreciate to have a woman teaching, So I asked this friend of mine, would he recommend me to the producers? And his reply was, "Over my dead body." He said, "They would never hire you in a million years." And then he said, "If you don't like it, why don't you start your own camp?" I guess he was having a bad day that day. But anyway, so I was with a friend, Jackie Thomason, a few days later, and I was pretty upset about it. And she said, "Let's do it. Let's start a camp." So we did. And as destiny has it, things just fell into place. Like we needed $3,000 to put down on the campsite, which was the first camp we did at Point Bonita out in the Marin Headlands, and we needed $3,000 as a down payment. Jackie suddenly received a check in the mail for $3,000 that came from a source that she had no idea she was getting a check from. So it kind of happened like that. It was supposed to happen. What I would tell younger women who drum, and really who play any instrument, three things. One is study everything you can, practice as much as you can, and respect, especially if you're playing music from the diaspora, because this music was preserved under great hardship, and the music is very profound, and it's thousands of years old. All of our music actually on the planet is. So you practice and you get as good as you can. So keep practicing, keep studying, and have respect. Just have a lot of respect from where it comes.